Thank you for listening to the Speaking with Confidence podcast. Give us a review to tell everyone why you love the podcast. You can also download, like, and share the podcast with friends. Be sure to visit formingforpublicspeaking.com and sign up for Forming for Public Speaking course. It's a step-by-step system to help you become the confident and powerful speaker you've always wanted to be. Confidence. The podcast is here to help you unlock the power of effective public speaking. I'm your host, Tim Newman, and I'm excited to take you on a journey to become a better public speaker. I really appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and thank you for your support. If each of you could do one thing for me, that would be to give us a 5-star review and share the podcast with someone close to you who would benefit from listening. Today's guest, Dr. Almitra Berry, is a nationally recognized speaker, author, and consultant focused on the education of culturally and linguistically diverse learners in America's K-12 education system. Her research focuses on equity and academic achievement for marginalized learners, particularly in majority of color, low wealth, large, urban school districts. She hosts the podcast Educational Equity Emancipation, is the author of the book Affecting Change for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners, now in its second edition. Her upcoming book to be released this spring is on equitable classroom practices for culturally and linguistically diverse learners, and numerous other articles focused on educational equity and instructional practices for classroom educators. She's also the content expert for multilingual development and perfect learning's connections, literature, and equity consultant for Savas Learning's Experience Science. Dr. Berry, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
You know, you have been, your career has virtually taken you all over the country. You've worked with educational systems from, top to bottom, large to small, well-funded, poorly funded, and you're still hanging in there, fighting a good fight. How do you manage to do that?
Every time I think I'm done, something else happens, usually in the education policy, the political sphere about education, that just really ticks me off and says to me, it's not time to stop yet.
Yeah.
So I always say that all I need is 15 minutes in a classroom full of kids, seeing that they are still showing up, they're eager to learn, and looking at data, knowing we're not meeting their needs, just tells me my work is not done.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I come from public education. Obviously, I worked in education most of my adult life, and it seems to me that the further we get down the road, the more we're failing our kids on a number of levels. I think we've lost our way in educating them in what's really important. And as I'm teaching now, you and I talked about it. I'm teaching a brand new class I've never taught before. It's for freshman students in college. It's called Perspectives on Education. And, we're talking about the public education system and how it works and or the way it's supposed to work and what people should be getting out of it. And, these students who have just completed that system really have no idea how it works or how it should work. And that's a shame.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, every single child in the country is mandated. It's either mandatory or compulsory, depending on the grade and what state you're in, but they all have to go to school. 12, 13 years. Kindergarten sometimes is optional, but 1 to 12, you're supposed to be in school. And so we have forced every single child, every family with children into a system that no one seems to completely understand, right? And they don't have a choice as to whether or not to participate. Sure, they could do homeschooling. There are different types of, you could do regular public, you could do public charter school, you could opt to pay for private school, but you have to go to something, and they all have essentially the same standards of when you're eligible to leave, saying that you completed it. And yet we still, if you ask most people, even those with children, they don't know how the system works.
Or how to get the most out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, or you said it two ways: how it's supposed to work and how it does work.
It does work,
Two
right?
different things. Yeah.
You know, my kids are grown now, and I've got I've got 3 grandkids, and they're not of school age yet. The oldest one is close to getting to school age. And you know, when my kids were younger, I told them, you know, if you have a problem in class, you need to deal with the teacher. Don't come to me. You go talk to the teacher. And if at that point you don't feel like you're not being treated fairly or you weren't heard, then you come to me. And, you know, my whole purpose in that was, number one, to get them to learn how to communicate, to get them to learn how to advocate for themselves, to get them to learn that, you know, sometimes it's best that it comes from them, and they're going to learn more if it comes from them. And my wife, who's also an educator, she's a retired educator, she about hit the roof when I said that. I said, no, we have to start teaching them these things, that they have to start advocating for themselves, because eventually, you know, we can't advocate for them. And they've got to learn how to do it, and they have to learn how to deal with different people and different personalities. And that's something.
Tim, you know, the challenge with that is, I hear you say that, and good for you that you taught your children to do that, is for kids who look like you, it's okay for them to challenge the teacher. Mm-hmm. But when our children have black and brown skin, when they challenge the teacher, it's often, overwhelmingly, it's a very different outcome, because those kids get suspended. They get sent to the office because they're defiant or they're disruptive. And so that how the system should work and how the system actually does work, that's like a glaring example of one of the biggest inequities in our system, is the lack of voice and agency for children with black and brown skin.
And I'm glad that you said that, because, you know, I teach at Georgia State University right now, which is one of the most diverse institutions in the country. You know, we're graduating more African American students than any other institution in the country. And I tell each class I teach, come talk to me. And they look at me like I'm nuts. I'm like, no, I'm different. I mean, you come talk to me. Please come talk to me. You know, we're gonna have some conversations. We're gonna talk, and if we don't agree, it's okay. There's it. You know, you have to. And I say you have to, and I step back and say, okay, I'm not going to tell you what you have to do. I'm suggesting that you do this because I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to get you out of what you've been taught your entire lives. You know, we've been taught our entire lives that, you know, if you get an A, that's great. But what did you learn? I need to know what you've learned. And trying to change mindset. And I see it on their faces, and it takes a full semester, you know, to get them to open up and come to me and say, okay, I have an issue with this. I have an issue with that. Can you explain this a little bit better? Whatever it is. And, you know, when they see that I've been true to my word, that's when now we start really having conversations. And
you have to build that trust, and building the trust, especially for a population of learners who've never had trust before. I say we have trust issues. I personally have trust issues, but also to build a culture in the classroom, whether it's K-12 or higher ed, where there is psychological safety for children. And I mean, even though they're in college, they're still, you know, in the grand scheme of things, they're still kids, right? They're just older, bigger kids, but not having that, not knowing that there is safety, not feeling psychological safety, or even understanding what that thing is.
Right.
Yeah, because they've not been taught what that thing is and what they should feel in a space in order to be able to give voice to what they're feeling and what you're asking them to talk about, to share.
Yeah. And, you know, so I've been there for 8 years, and when I first arrived there, that was a culture shock for me, you know, because before that I taught, well, my first job was at a high school just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, predominantly African-American as well. But my first college teaching job was at York College of Pennsylvania, small private school, not very diverse. You know, it is what it is, and didn't really have some of those things. I mean, there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of back and forth. And then, so I go to Georgia State, and it smacked me right in the face, because that wasn't what I was expecting at all. I could kind of get it teaching in high school. Okay, that's one thing, but I was not expecting it when I went to Georgia State, and it, not that I had to really change the way I was doing things. I had to really have a more open process in getting them to understand and actually showing them and proving to them that, it's okay to advocate. It's okay to say, I don't agree with this, or ask a question, why are you doing it like that? I don't understand your thinking, your methodology, what have you. And so that's, for me, that was very eye-opening.
Yeah, I bet.
So, back to the public school system, there are a few things that we do not teach our kids, which to me is unfathomable. We don't teach them soft skills, communication skills very well. We don't teach them critical thinking skills very well. And, financial literacy is
huge.
And without those three things, I don't care what you do. You're just not going to be successful, because you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah. Well, it begs the question. We know these things as adults, right?
Yes.
If you work anywhere in the corporate world, you have to have soft skills. There are things that we're evaluated on. If you work anywhere in the corporate world, or even not in corporate world, you could be checking groceries at the store or working in an auto repair shop.
Right.
You have to have those communication skills to run a business, even a small business, even if it's a lawn care business or a housekeeping business. You have to have the financial literacy, and you have to have those soft skills. So it sort of begs the question, if we know this as educated adults, why is it that we refuse to provide that instruction in public schools? Why is it that we refuse to put those things into the state standards and frameworks of all 50 states in this country? When we know, and we know our politicians know, and we know our Department of Education people know, that these are critical things. And the only answer I can come up with, and you can say I'm a conspiracy theorist if you want to, is that there is a design to keep certain people in a caste system where they have to rely on either social welfare, essentially that they will remain oppressed, that they will remain in low skilled jobs because they don't have the skills. But if you can put your kid in private school, if you can pay the $20, $30, $40, $50,000 a year tuition for your child to be in a private school system, those things are all going to be taught. And the people who can afford that are the ones who can continue to oppress and marginalize our technically or mostly immigrant population and our people of color who've been here for multiple generations, who are stuck in a system that is governed by people who do not see them as being worthy of having every opportunity in the world to advance themselves.
And you know what? I pretty much 90% agree with you there. I think that the one piece where I would maybe differ a little bit is even if I think some of at those private schools, that I don't know that they're being taught better than the people in public schools for sure. Yeah. But even still, I don't know that they've been given the real tools that they need either.
But what do they get, Tim? Think about, what do you get coming out of a high-end private school that they don't out of a public?
Oh, you get a lot of things. You get the connections, you get the networking, you get some of those other things that are going to move you forward. I definitely, I'm 100% with you there.
Yeah. So even if you don't have all the skills, if you've got the network, you've got the connections, you've got the label, you can get into where you need to. And someone's going to, my husband always talks about this, and he's in the investments world, where there were people who were wholly underqualified, but there was always a connection. And so they would take them, we're just going to take you under our wing and nurture you through, where people who are highly qualified, who have the knowledge, who have the skills, but don't have that Ivy League education, or even if it's a K-12 private system, they come in, they are not taken under anyone's wing.
Yeah.
Right?
You're right.
So it allows you, those connections allow you to navigate a system where people who are equally or more qualified are not allowed to do so.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I tell my my students and people that I coach on this a lot over and over again. Number one, and you know the gods are watching us. I don't trust any of our politicians at all. Not as far as I can throw them. I really don't.
I have a friend who is a former school board member, and she said politics is made up of two Greek words: poly meaning many, and ticks meaning bloodsuckers.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's it. You know, I think some people get into it for the right reasons, and they get into it and they lose their way. And I don't think they're looking out for us. They're not looking out for the regular people. They're definitely not looking out for the disadvantaged people. And you know, it's the best honestly, what I tell them, the best we can do is we can only affect the people that are around us. And I try and affect, you know, these people, and you should try and affect these people, and that's where the ripple effect starts. And you know, educate yourself, ask for help, advocate for yourself, and those types of things. You know, if we teach them that's all we can really do. I mean, you know, look at let's move on to some other things. You know, because you know, for me, we can complain about it, but that's not who I am or what I do. So we see a problem, and so what are the solutions? You know, how can we fix it?
Right. And that's why I keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
There are problems. I mean, I could complain about it, but you know, so what? I'm doing everything that I can do. Where I have input and I have access, I continue to do what I can do in speaking truth to power and educating others so that they can do the same where they have some influence.
Yeah. And, you know, again, that's why, you know, we talked to, you know, this is my last semester teaching full time, and I really think that I can be more effective and help more people outside of the current system. And, and hopefully that bears truth. But anyway, let's talk about you. You know, can you share your current mission and your thoughts on the current state of public education in terms of the communication, critical thinking skills, and what you're doing in those areas?
Sure. Well, most of what I would say 99% of the work that I engage in is really aimed at K-12. And, you know, as is in my bio, it's in those majority of color districts, whether they are large urban or small rural. But those are the systems that are often overlooked, underfunded, where the kids come out. And if they do go to college, even if it's a state school, wherever they go, or a community college, they're often having to take not mandatory, but prerequisite, not even prerequisite. They've got to do the catch-up coursework because they have the basic skills. So they're taking remedial. Thank you. That's I hate to use that word. I guess that's why it didn't want to come to mind. But they're having to take those remedial reading, remedial math classes because they don't have the skills yet to perform in a general higher ed classroom. So I focus on those systems. That's where we have the greatest shortage of teachers coming in. We have underfunded systems, and we have greater teacher churn. We have kids that are highly mobile. So I stay in that space and focus on working with the teachers that are there and within the systems that exist. Because really the bottom line is when a teacher walks into a classroom and he's got 20, 30, 35, in some places 40 kids in front of them, when that door closes, they can move mountains if they have the tools to do so. And sometimes those tools are the soft skills, the strategies, the methodologies. It may not be the textbooks that they give you, not the what, but it's the how you teach. And so I'm focused very much on teaching teachers how to establish a culture in their classroom. We just got a title for the book that's coming out this spring. It'll be published by Corwin. It's going to be called The Culturally Connected Educator. right? And that's the big thing. If, as an educator, you are connected to your kids and you understand who they are and what they bring to the classroom, you can reach them and teach them. And it doesn't matter what books they say you can or cannot use, what methods you can or cannot use, because you will have that connection and they will want to learn from you. So there's a lot more to it than just that piece, but that to me has always been the greatest foundational piece for an educator in a classroom, is to be able to be connected to your kids.
And it's no different than really anything else. It's all about relationships with people and how you treat people.
Yeah.
I mean, if you treat, I've got a friend who I'm also coaching, and he's selling his business. And, we were talking about some things about, there were some issues with an adjacent business, and he was talking about problems there. And I said, look, Mike, it comes down to people. And if you treat people right, everything else will take care of itself. Yeah. And I said, that's the messaging that you need to be sharing, build good relationships. If there's issues, find out what the issue is, fix it. Take your ego and put it aside and build relationships. And if you treat people right, everything else takes care of itself. It's no different than being in the classroom. Because you, like you said, you're going to have, you go into a classroom, you're going to have 30, 35 students, which means you're going to have 31 to 36 different personalities in there. Right?
Yeah. Sometimes
at any given
more.
time. Sometimes more, right? Yeah. And on any given day. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because we all come to every day in every situation with a different perspective, a different attitude. Some days are good, some days are not. Sometimes you feel great, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad. And we don't know what these kids are coming with.
Yes,
every day.
With our kids, sometimes they're coming hungry. Right? They're coming from a home where they don't have electricity. They're cold. They're underfed. There's all sorts of stuff going on. I remember I had a student, sweet kid, 6th grader, is very quiet and shy typically, but not withdrawn. And one day he seemed off. And so I asked him what was wrong, because he didn't want to do his work. And he wasn't like a stellar student, but he always tried. He always worked hard. And I asked him what was going on, and he showed me his hands. He literally just opened up his palms and put them out in front of me. And I asked him what happened. His hands were just raw. And he said that it makes me want to tear up again. He told me that he had to, because of something that happened in the family, he had to go out and work in the fields with his family that weekend. And so his hands, because he didn't have gloves, were literally raw. This is a 12-year-old child whose hands were raw from picking crops. And yet he shows up for school, right? And had I not taken the time to find out what was going on, or he'd been in a classroom with a teacher who didn't care what was going on, but just that he refused to do his work, it could have had a very different outcome. So if we don't take that time to know who these kids are and what's happening to them, we can't reach them.
Yeah. So build relationships. Get to know your students. And I say it all the time. Get to know the people you work with. Get to know. I mean, you can't relate to somebody if you don't know them. And that student didn't refuse to do his work. He physically couldn't do his work. He wanted to do his work. He couldn't do his work.
Yeah.
Right. And it's those types of things where, what, he needed somebody. But he didn't know who to trust. Even
right.
Didn't know who to trust, or didn't know how to say it. Didn't know how to ask for help. Well, that again is a different skill set.
And either didn't know how or feared what would happen if he asked for help. Mm-hmm. Right? What happens to my parents if a teacher sees this and they get reported for child abuse? That kind of thing. That was the last thing I wanted to happen to him, because I knew the child's story, not just that weekend, but his life story. Last thing I'm going to do is report his parents. They were kind of trying to keep food on the table. Right. And yet some people had they reported the parents for that abuse, he'd ended up in foster care. And when you look at the data on the foster care system, it's horrible. It's horrible. For many kids, it's either a pathway to prison or a pathway to the streets, and some other things that I really just don't want to think about. What happens to our kids that literally get thrown away? Yeah.
And so again, it comes back to building relationships and community. And let's take it to a different extreme, right? So you talk about Stockton, which is where you grew up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not a fun place, right? You worked in South Dakota. I mean, you worked school districts in South Dakota, North Dakota.
No, those are the two of the states I haven't been to yet.
Okay.
I've worked in 40. I've worked in 45 states, but North and South Dakota are two that I have not made it to yet. So if you're in North or South Dakota,
maybe I have them wrong. The indigenous populations school districts,
Arizona, mostly Arizona
okay,
and New Mexico.
Sorry.
Yeah,
my fault. I apologize for that.
That's okay. No worries.
They have a lot of other different issues.
Yeah,
alcoholism on the reservations. Women disappearing, sexual assaults. I mean, crazy things that most people or normal people don't know about that terrorizes these communities, and we brush them under the rug, and yet students come to school
every day. Yeah. There are multiple Americas within America. Yeah. And our children, for the majority of our children in the K-12 system, keep in mind that roughly 63% of children in American public schools are children of color. Right? So when we talk about the norm has been set on a very white, middle-class Christian society, but that is not necessarily who's in attendance in our public schools in the majority. It's the majority of the people who are teaching in our schools, hence a huge cultural disconnect. But our kids very often are coming from worlds that we don't know, don't understand, don't want to know, don't care to know. And it's whether it's in one of the schools on the reservation or inner city, Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, it doesn't matter. There are whole worlds that are not looked at as we consider what our children need and where they're coming from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, I think most people understand the term culturally diverse, but what do you, when you talk about linguistically diverse learners, what does that mean to you so our audience understands as we move into this next phase of the conversation?
Sure. Light topic. So linguistic diversity, when I'm talking about that, is any English other than school English, or what we think of as business English. A lot of people will say standard English. So for a Chicano kid living in East LA who speaks Chicano English, that is a different language. African American English is a different language. If you're down in Louisiana, southeastern Texas, where kids will speak a Cajun or Creole English, is a different English. If you're up in, I've worked in West Virginia where they speak Appalachian English. They're all white. They speak English, but it's not the English of school. And so we consider linguistic diversity. It's all of those Creole languages, different types of English. Some people say dialects. There's, a little, even in academia, a little, is it a dialect or is it something else? Is it a Creole? But in English, that is not the English that their textbooks are written in. And so understanding that as educators, which is actually the focus of my book that will not be out for another year and a half at least, is having the knowledge and understanding to bridge their home language. And it doesn't matter if the home language is Spanish or French or Ukrainian or some other, what we think of as a world language,
right.
Or if it's a regional Creole even Hawaiian Creole is another one, but that we use that language as their bridge to school English without denigrating or denying them access and usage of that home language when it's needed.
Thank you for the explanation, because I learned something there. I was thinking more strict languages like Spanish, Vietnamese, French. I do have some Far Eastern students, some Hispanic students. So that's kind of where I was thinking. I wasn't even thinking about the different regional, what I would call dialects. But you're absolutely right. It's that does become a challenge. So how as educators and as these students, do we connect with them to get them to be able to tell their stories so that they can be heard? Again, when I talk about public speaking, it's not just being on the stage. It's everything. It's interpersonal communication. It's job interviews. It's all, anytime that you're communicating with another individual. And one of the ways to build relationships and connections is be able to tell your story. And students and young professionals, they don't like doing that. So how do we get them to do that, especially being linguistically diverse?
Yeah. So not just diversity. I think the first layer is that we recognize multilingualism as meaning more than just speaking English and another identified world language.
Right.
I'm multilingual. I'll say I personally am multilingual. I do speak standard English, school English, business English. That's the voice that you're hearing coming over your podcast. And I'm going to venture a guess that if there are people on the audio podcast who just tuned in and started listening to our conversation, unless I said now that I am a Black woman, you would not know that I was Black, or that I can also speak African American English when I'm in a setting where it's appropriate, when I'm with my family or a group of friends playing dominoes, in a cultural setting where that language is the accepted language. But I can also transition to a formal Spanish, or, because I also live in the Dominican Republic, a Dominican Spanish that is more accepted in the community, right? Not in business, but just out in a restaurant, in a store, just out doing everyday things. That multilingualism is not as respected as in America as just straight school English. And so that first layer is recognizing and respecting that there are many different types of language and that they are all valid systems for communication, for writing. Second piece of that is granting learners permission to use those different languages in the classroom in different contexts. If you want me to tell my story, I can tell it in standard English, but some of it won't make sense to other people who look like me unless I tell it also, or in certain parts, in an African American English or in Spanish. So when we're talking about our children opening up and telling their stories, first we have to, if we're talking K-12, we have to grant them permission to tell their story in the language that works for them and the part of the story that they're telling. And when it comes to the business world and getting out to higher ed and being placed into business or into jobs, what they have to understand is there is a place for your home language and there is a place to use business English. Mm-hmm. And if we give them those tools and those skill sets when they're younger, they can flip that language and use it whenever it's necessary. That is true multilingualism.
That's a lot to think about there.
Yeah.
I'm somebody who I tell people to lean into yourself, lean into into who you are.
Yeah.
And when you're at least, especially when you're dealing with me, I mean, to me, I don't care. I mean, just be you. You be you. You be you. But on the other hand, I get the whole idea of some social norms. But on the other hand, I also get that we also have to accept people for who they are in society and not be so judgmental.
We should accept
Right.
We should
Should
accept
accept.
people for who they are.
Right.
But the challenge, Tim, is if you've lived in different skin. So I can only
Mhm.
speak about living in my skin.
Right.
But living in my skin, I could not always be my authentic self.
Right.
If I wanted that promotion, I had to behave within the set of norms that they had established for that position. And so our kids coming from same places, when they have learned from their own experiences that if they express themselves authentically, they won't get that job. They won't get that promotion. They're not felt welcome. Then it's difficult to say, for them to expect that they can be their authentic self no matter where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one for me to. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. It's a tough one for me to really wrap my head around, to because for the most part, I mean, I've never had that like other people have had. I mean, I get it. When I was younger, yeah, I had to play a role, but not like a lot of roles that minorities have to play every day. I'm at a point in my career now as I really don't care. Oh,
That happens somewhere around 50 where you get to the point it's like, so what? Who cares? Yeah.
This is me. This is what you're going to get.
Yeah. Yeah. But at this point, we've made our mark, right? We've done what we've needed to do. And, you and I are trying to get that next generation or younger generations to get to that point of where they can say, who cares anymore? I've done what I've needed to do and I can keep going and I'll be okay. When you're 18, 20, 22, either just coming out of high school or just coming out of college and you need to get a job,
you can't do that.
It's you can't do that.
Can't do that.
You just can't do that. So it would be wonderful if we lived in a world where people would just accept everyone for who they are authentically.
Right.
But we don't. We're a very judgmental society. So
and you throw social media on top of that, because to me that's the real kicker, where young people put so much weight and emphasis on what somebody on social media said about them. So now they're trying to cover a base that there's no way that they can cover that, because you can't. Somebody on social media is going to say something bad about you. They don't like the way your hair looks. I mean, your eyebrows out of place. You got whatever it is. And at some point, we didn't have, when we were growing up, we didn't have that at all. I mean, we had the regular bullying, which is a different story. But you could go home.
Yeah. In regular bullying, you'd
to
get in a fight, you'd have your little fist fight and you'd shake hands and go home. Nobody came back and shot you.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So it's a very different world that our children, and I say our children, but the Gen Xers, millennials, and not Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, millennials, Gen Z, and what are they? The new ones, Generation Alpha, the next gen coming. Yeah, I know. I'm a boomer. I'm just trying to keep up.
See, I'm an X, and I tell people, I said that's why you don't put Gen X people in charge, because we just don't care anymore. We're just gonna wipe clean it up. This is the way it's going to be. But I do tell my students, I said, it's going to be your generations that change this.
Yeah.
Because our generation couldn't do it. Right. We couldn't do it. It's good. If it's going to change, it's going to have to come from you all. Has to.
Yeah. Yeah. Change starts with, and like I said, I'm a baby boomer. So, we did our thing. And maybe there was quite a bit of change that came out of the baby boomers, but there's still more that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And so it's always that generation of young people that really, really impacts societal change. And so we have to count on them. And, I would just say that there's this whole big conversation that them having the ability and the skills to communicate and to speak their passion and to speak truth to power in a way that will be listened to, paid attention to, understood, and absorbed is like a critical skill for change.
Yeah.
And so we've got to teach them how to do that.
Yeah. And last night I watched a video on LinkedIn. It was a gentleman from United Kingdom who runs a car sales business, and they had went to a networking event, and one of his top salesmen is a young female. And at the networking event, somebody from a manufacturer or something was talking to her and was telling her, well, you shouldn't even be in the automobile business. You're a woman, this, that, and the other thing. And this gentleman came on and he said, you know what, first off, that thinking is, he had some choice words on it. But what he said was, why aren't we at the point yet where we respect talent? Doesn't matter who it is, male or female, whatever gender it is, whatever color it is, whatever race, whatever religion. Why are we still at this point where we're judging female can't be in the car industry? This doesn't make any sense.
A female can't be president of the United States.
Right. I don't understand this at all. And I come from the sport industry and was in the military, and we both those have their own issues. But from my perspective, I was brought up, I don't care who it is. I want the best person. I want the best person sitting next to me. I want the best person in the huddle. I want the best person on the sideline. I want the best person in the foxhole with. I don't care. I really don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. And until we get to that point, I don't know that a lot of these educational issues are going to change either. Somebody's just has to say enough is enough.
Yeah,
it's frustrating.
It is. It's hugely frustrating. I think until we get to a place where everybody understands the power of their vote, not just for the president, but all the way down for city council and school boards. School boards, people don't realize how important and how much power a school board has when it comes to impacting education. And school board elections are often chosen by it's like less than 5% of the voting public that actually votes for and chooses school boards. We're just abdicating our power. And until we change that and become, commit to voting, odd tidbit, the United States of all democracies in the world, the United States has one of the lowest voting rates. We don't vote in this country, and we consider ourselves the world's greatest democracy, but we don't use our power, and they're still trying to suppress the power of the vote. But it's, that all of these things and getting that developing that understanding or desire to have the best people do things, a lot of that comes from the way we choose to use our voice, our power, and our vote. And until we do that,
this is what we get.
This is what we get.
Oh.
This is what we get. What's that? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Yeah. But we keep doing the same thing.
I'm happy that we have people like you that are continuing the good fight, continuing to continue to affect change, even if it's one person at a time. It's one's better than none, two's better than one, and it's. Yeah. We need people like you to continue the good fight. And I've got two other topics. I just wanted to, one just kind of popped in my head. What are your thoughts on AI in the educational system?
AI can be your friend and it can be your foe. I think there's some things, if I put an old classroom educator hat on, I wish I had AI where I could have taken my students' papers, scanned them, input them into AI and say, grade this paper based on this rubric. That would have been really, really nice to have as a tool. As a writer, sometimes it's like, I'm trying to say this, but I can't get it out right. And so I can put my sort of garbled, messed up thoughts into a very well-programmed, I don't want people to think you can just dump this into anything, but I have a very well-programmed AI platform that I use where I've uploaded all of my content. So it's reading my past work, right? And understanding my voice. And I can say, fix this statement for me. and it'll spit something out that's like, okay, that's what I'm trying to say. But then I take that and I put it into my own words, right? Not just spitting it out. I think the big fear is that, especially from an educator perspective, is that kids are going to have AI bots just writing all their papers and not learning. And that could happen, but there are ways to put some checks and balances around that. But there is a place for it. And I think that if we as educators fear that technology, we are hindering progress, because our kids are going to graduate into that technology and they're going to need to know how to use it. So rather than say, we don't want the AI in our schools, it would be better to say, how do we use this technology to further our children's educations and prepare them for the world of work and technology that they're going to exit into in 1 to 12 years, depending on where they are.
Exactly. The second one I'll ask you offline, because it's probably not appropriate for this, but I kind of use AI exactly how you use it. Helps me generate ideas or clean something up, and then put it in my own words. And again, if we don't use it, and if we don't learn how to use it, and our students and their kids are using it, it's a problem. I mean, it's when social media came out, and when Twitter came out, I went to my daughter and I said, tell me about this Twitter thing. And she looked at me last and shook her head and said, "Dad, you don't want anything part of it." And I said, "Okay."
She was right. She was
said,
right.
But I said, "You know what? I better learn this thing really quick."
Yeah.
Because and eventually, so I wrote a textbook on social media and sport marketing, and social media eventually kind of took over my life.
Yeah.
And I had to quit. I had to say, no more, because I was spending 12 hours a day on all these sites, and kind of getting lost.
It can suck you. I always talk about going down a rabbit hole. That's more like a black hole, and you can get in there and lose hours in a day. And while I use social media to market my podcasts, my books, my speaking engagements, I don't engage in the back and forth that goes on in social media. I very rarely will read comments. I have someone else that can do that. And if it's something that I need to attend to, can bring it to my attention. But that platform you mentioned, formerly under Twitter, I don't ever go there. I don't post there. I don't look there. I don't have logins for that, because it became such a vile environment for someone like me who works in that sort of that bigger DEI space. It just was not a healthy place to be. And I'm a psychologically very healthy person, but I worry about people who are not psychologically healthy, and the damage that it can do to their wellness by being in those platforms. And, for our children, in looking at that and unrealistic expectations about body image or appearance, dress and possessions, even what we have, that it's just, it's unhealthy, while I wouldn't say we need to regulate it all. I think as parents and caregivers who have children should be very, very wary about where their children are spending their time on devices, especially on social media.
I look at another one of our institutions in the country that's broken. Our mental health care system is completely broken. And, if you look at what, I don't put all of the blame on social media, but I do put a big piece of that, because as a society, we have allowed ourselves to live in that world and put so much emphasis on that, like I brought up a little bit ago. And, look at depression rates, look at suicide rates, look at eating disorders.
It's interesting that when we look at those numbers and the connection to social media here in the United States, it's very different in other countries, because the algorithms are set differently. What our kids are getting pushed on TikTok, the dances and the eating things challenges and all this other crazy nonsense. If you go to other countries, what their kids are, the content being pushed to their kids is how to do math, how to do science. We have, it's not, so it's like, I cannot completely blame those platforms, and everybody's picking on TikTok. You can't blame TikTok. It's the algorithms that have been set and what we are allowing and encouraging our children to look at, and what even we as adults are looking at. Because if that goes back to the whole AI thing, right? If you use it for good, it can be a very good tool. I don't get nonsense stuff pushed to me on TikTok because I don't engage in that piece.
Right.
So, yeah.
You see, I'm not on TikTok. I'm heading.
I've got a good audience there. I've got a good audience for short information. Yeah, short information about education that people will attend to. I can reach a broad audience. Not everybody's going to tune in for my 25-minute podcast. So, I get them wherever I can, and that's one place where I'm getting them. So,
is there anything else that we didn't talk about that our listeners should think about or know about?
It's funny. When we first connected, I was thinking, because of the topic of your podcast, that I was going to talk about how I used to throw up every time I had to give a speech. But
no, I try not to bring that up, but too much. There was no cameras or cell phones back then, so there's no video evidence. But
it lives with me. It lives in my head, and I think about that mandatory, had to take it in order to graduate, college course, rhetoric. I think it was Rhetoric 1 or Rhetoric 100, whatever it was. And I literally I was physically ill anytime I was going to have to stand up and talk. And that, went all the way down to elementary school. I was afraid to stand up and talk. And now, sort of the joke that I make a living by speaking. But it's because, and so when people say, I can't imagine you used to be shy. It's like, I was terrified to speak. But what I found was my passion. And when I found my passion, I found my voice. Right. And you cannot stop me from talking about what I'm passionate about. So, just you find that, and I think you'll be okay. But, if you're still puking at the thought of having to stand up in front of people and talk, it's perfectly normal.
It is. And you haven't found your passion yet. Like you said, that's a very good point that I hope our listeners just got. When you find something that you love and that you're passionate about, a lot of these issues do not necessarily go away, because even still, when I get up and talk, sometimes I'm nervous. I mean, that's depending on the audience, depending on the actual topic and what's going on, still nervous. But once you get going, if you prepare the way you're supposed to prepare, if you do the things you're supposed to do, it's just like anything else. Once you get going, it just happens naturally.
Yeah, it may take me 5 minutes to get warmed up, but once I'm on a roll, baby, watch out.
Well, that's awesome. Dr. Berry, where can people find you and buy your books?
Well, I am at Almitra Berry on every social media platform except Twitter X. Not there. Don't look for me there. So I always tell people the best place to look for me is LinkedIn, and TikTok. Actually, those get attended to a little bit more. My books can be purchased on Amazon or any bookstore, almost internationally, definitely nationwide. So, your Barnes and Noble, and whatever, even local independent bookstores, I'm there. But if you have trouble finding it, just hit me up. My podcast is the Educational Equity Emancipation Podcast, and it's on every podcast channel that there is. So, it's hard for me to hide with that name Almitra. So start typing it as a search engine, I'm going to pop up.
And they will find you.
Yes.
It's hard to hide when you're as well known as you are. That's for sure. Oh. Dr. Berry, thank you so much for joining us. You gave us some really good information. Keep up the good fight. I'm going to do it as long as I can. And we'll see what happens. But thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Be sure to visit speakingwithconfidencepodcast.com to join our growing community and register for the Formula for Public Speaking course. Always remember, your voice has the power to change the world. We'll talk to you next time. Take care. I hope you enjoyed the latest episode of Speaking with Confidence.
Give us a review to tell everyone why you love the podcast. You can also download, like, and share the podcast with friends. Be sure to visit formingforpublicspeaking.com and sign up for the Forming for Public Speaking course. It's a step-by-step system to help you become the confident and powerful speaker you've always wanted to be. We'll see you next time. Take care.